I think it is processing and about to go live. So we're going to do the awkward chit chat here for a moment while Facebook and Zoom connect. If you're joining us, let us know where you're joining us from. I think that we're good to go here. And let me double check that we have all the things. Duane, say hi. I'm going to mute myself and I'll be back in 1 second so I can just check this.
It's good. Hello, everybody out there in Facebook land.
I think we're good. Hi, everybody. Let me try one more thing here. And actually, can I use my phone? I'm going to introduce this lovely fella here, somebody who I have had the honor and pleasure of getting to know over the past couple of years. This is Duane Pascal, and I said that correctly, I believe.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. And he is the owner of Waking Life Integrative Coaching and Bodywork. And we wanted to come on here and go live because we had a conversation recently about something that I think is often overlooked as coaches and as even just as like holistic practitioners and professionals. So we wanted to deep dive and start to explore this idea of curiosity as a coach, as a professional, as somebody who is really committed to supporting clients and getting results. And Duane, do you want to say hi real quick? And I'm gonna check something here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on today. It's really great to see you and be chatting with you about this subject. Yeah, it's definitely been something that's helped me out recently quite a bit.
Absolutely. And can you share a little bit maybe about how, like what brought you, like a little bit background around, I'm going to get to the question. Can you share a little bit about yourself? Maybe where you started from and what brought you into body mind?
Sure. A little bit about myself. I've been a massage therapist since 2007. I have my own private practice in Tacoma, Washington. I also worked with a couple of swim teams during my career as a massage therapist. And I came into body mind because it really was the next thing to do, learning to work smarter and not harder, and really a great way to be of service. So I found your program actually long before I even joined it. And it was really mostly about getting that newsletter support every month because that felt really great. But one day, one of your newsletters hit me like a ton of bricks. And here we are a couple of years later working into this program. And I'm really starting to build this new life now because of it. So yeah, and now we get to talk about all the layers that got me to this point of curiosity.
I just love that. And I think this is one of those things where we don't realize how just showing up and sharing and continuing to share is so important. Because I know a lot of times as coaches and people who step into this world, there's this like, I need to say the right thing. I need to get it right, say the right thing, and like protect myself from failure and rejection. And I mean, the truth is, it's really just about consistently showing up. And I think that's where curiosity is such a valuable skill to practice.
Yeah, and there was a bit of surrender to that too, because like you said, I mean, I think a lot of us coming into the program, we're coming into this, a lot of us as massage therapists and maybe some counselors. And so we have that natural feeling that we might have to have an answer for people. And I was just sharing this with Shayna that you're right. It's been a lot about showing up. I mean, I joined this program in the middle of pandemic or in the beginning of pandemic, and there's lots of layers and things to talk about with that. But, there are many days that just showing up is what got me through. And all the layers that came through that and learning all the layers about myself and learning to surrender to the idea that I don't have to have the answers. Curiosity really started to play a role, and it took a long time before, honestly, it finally popped. And this was just within the last couple months, really. I had picked up one of my books, which is the proactive coaching or something, and I flipped open to just a random flip open just to see. I'm going to read wherever I stop. It was on curiosity, and it was everything I needed to read in that moment. It really just helped me change my perception. It helped me get out of it. It helped me get out of my own way in that moment. There was just something about what I read in that chapter about being curious that finally was able to help me let go of the idea or the burden of thinking that I had to come up with the answer, listening to my client or friend or anybody for that matter in front of me. And of course, I don't know verbatim, but the idea in that chapter had a lot to do with just shifting. And it was just the right moment for me. And that shift really had a lot to do with being curious, as far as when I'm listening to somebody, take myself out of this like gathering seat of gathering their information and trying to put their story together in my head. And instead, metaphorically, or maybe even literally, sit next to that person and watch them paint the picture in front of you and just be curious as it happens. I mean, we don't go into movies thinking that we want to know exactly what happens. We go in and we take it in. And so to be able to finally comprehend that aspect of curiosity, just to just let it be and just let this person paint that story for you, that was just a magic moment that I was able to get out of my own way. And it's probably one of the most clearest moments that I've been able to get out of my own way. Sometimes it's been a little more subtle, where I'll work on something and the next day I finally, oh yeah, okay. But it was very clear that, the way for me to move forward in that moment was to really embrace that aspect of curiosity and being told the story. And that's what we're doing as coaches, is we're putting ourselves in a position to be willing to hear somebody's story. So, anytime I find myself listening to somebody's story, that old program comes up of like, okay, what could I say? Or maybe they need this or consultation, da, da, da. It's like, no, kick back. You're being told the story, let the pages turn, let the scene change, and just take it all in that way. It's been pretty revolutionary. And, I'm on my third men's group now, and, whatever timing comes in when it's supposed to, but I wish I'd had that in the first men's group. But it is what it is. And that it showed up now, it actually feels a lot more valuable. But, in retrospect, it would have been great. But yeah, curiosity is super important, super important.
Well, and I'm curious what you learned by going through that first men's group and doing it and really surrendering into your own experience of curiosity.
I can answer that in this way. It was actually, admittedly, I dragged myself through every meeting. And the guys know this, and they know that, when I told them that it was difficult, I kind of felt bad almost, but at the same time, it was just my vulnerability. But so I put together my first men's group, and it was difficult. Every week it was difficult for me just to go and show up. But the reflection of that is the same thing showing up for the program in the middle of the pandemic. Sometimes it was all I could do. And so, taking that as the driving passion, it's like all you have to do is show up, and I did that. And so the more and more I showed up, the more and more I pushed through that pain, the easier it got. I mean, there were some layers within running my first men's group, realizing that I was also doing a lot of healing myself of the experience I've had with men growing up. But the idea of showing up every day at the bare minimum was probably really, really key. And just surrendering into that was super important. I feel like I kind of digressed off into a different direction, but the idea of really at least just showing up, at least getting to the parking lot, so to speak. I mean, it's like yoga. I mean, I don't always want to go to yoga, but there's never been a time that I felt bad when I didn't, when I did get there. And so the idea of just showing up to the parking lot, at least getting there, is really what pulls me through.
Well, and I think this is so important in that especially a lot of people who step into this role of coach. And what we love about Body Mind is like, Duane, you have always had that coaching energy, and that like just how you show up and how you support people has always had this desire to really help people live into their potential, and doing that in a way that is just so aligned, and just you're so compassionate and caring. And one of the things that we see time and time again with folks coming in and owning their coaching role, not learning how to or becoming, like owning their coaching role, is that first step is you just got to show up to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a ripping off of the Band-Aid that has to happen, because I think a lot of people want to wait until they're like, I have this coaching thing in the back, and then I'm going to go coach.
Yeah.
But it's like you have to be in those environments and in those relationships and in those circles to just own it.
Mm-hmm. Owning it also means letting it be messy.
Letting it be messy. Yes, we talk about let it feel your way forward, let it be messy.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's where we were going with this. We're going to the vulnerability. I mean, I think the owning it and the showing up, it is all vulnerability. I mean, you're right. We always have this want or this need to want to like try to give an answer, but really that vulnerability is what has allowed me to show up for the curiosity. I think also learning, being vulnerable, especially with our clients, also helps them understand that we're also human.
And I think it's our humanity. Like we actually talked about this on our last group call earlier this week, was be human. Like stop trying to think that you're supposed to be perfect and your life is supposed to be perfect and you're supposed to have it all together. Like be a human who shows up and holds space, and you get to show up fully as you are in that moment doing that. I just think I would venture to guess that if we were to go and talk to the gentlemen in that first men's group that you hosted, they were all fully served in the capacity which you showed up.
They all told me as such. I mean, at the end with my exit interviews, I was very vulnerable. I mean, there was some really great moments with, especially some of those men, when it came to intentional vulnerability, which we've spoken about before. But yeah, there definitely was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious. It sounds like your vulnerability is a strength of yours.
I'm finding that it is. Like when I'm able to just be who I am and admit things that I've gone through. You're right. I mean, I think even for myself, it's like anytime I'm looking for leadership and things like that, I'm looking for somebody that's human. I'm looking for somebody that accepts all aspects of their lives. And so to be able to live that, and even to learn to live that, coaching, learning to be a coach also helps us on a very personal level, because we're going through all this, we're resorting of our layers and things like that. And so living this life, I don't know, if I feel like it's boosted my emotional intelligence. I feel like, it's just allowing me to feel into my life more, and see things for what they really are.
I love that. And I want to go back to, so I kind of want to go from explore the journey of, you've mentioned a couple times that like feeling of like, I need to tell this person what to do or give them the answer, or get this right. I'd love to start there and just like, can you share like, what is the experience of that?
Now I would say that the aspect of thinking that I have to have the answer for somebody feels pretty heavy. In the beginning, it felt very purposeful, I think, because I think that's the role that, like, what am I as a coach, and you're trying to feel into that. And then naturally, we've always done this sort of consultation, right? But to learn to be in this more curious side of things, it's practice, right? And so the experience of learning to surrender yourself to listen to somebody's story. That's a big time layering practice for me, from my experience. But now that I've been able to figure that out, just it seems like when you just slip behind that, things start to get easier. You start to recognize when you're wanting to give advice. Not that that goes away. Okay. I mean, anybody listening to this, I mean, you're still going to listen to people and you're still going to want to give advice. But the idea of learning this secondary way of just surrendering and listening to their story is really where you want to be. And it's okay to feel like you want to give answers, but maybe turn those more into the aspect of curiosity. It helps me stay vulnerable to their story, so I can continue to be more curious. And the more curious I get, the more agency I feel I'm having to ask questions that maybe I normally wouldn't have asked before, due to feeling conservative about how I'm going to interact with that person.
You were saying like 50 genius things, and I want everybody to go back and listen to everything that you just shared there. Can we unpack this a little bit?
Yeah, because I've had experience that brought me to this. So
okay. So first, you're describing the feeling. Like I love how you said, especially folks who come from like a service-based profession, and both of you and I both come from, we were both body workers, and we have all sorts of professions, but there's this impulse that our value and this purpose, you said it felt very purposeful to want to give answers and tell people what to do and say, hey, here's the 3 steps. And what I've actually found, I call this the advice trap, where what happens is your ego feels good because you've given somebody the 3 steps. Their brain feels full, and it gives the illusion of safety.
Yeah.
Because when people think that they have the answers, they think that it's going to bypass the uncomfortability of actually doing the thing. So for those of you listening who spend extra time with your clients, giving them free advice, telling them what to do, and wondering why they don't actually follow through. And by the way, you're literally leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table when you do that. It's because of this little thing. And I actually think it's kind of a bit of a stress mechanism. Like we as the profession, because I still do this, y'all. Like it's an impulse. It's that like you feel this wave coming up, like, oh, if they just do this, they'll be safe, they'll be fine, right? And we want to tell them.
Yeah, it's very familiar in our body when we're going through it. So yeah.
And I also think that sometimes there's a little people pleasing under it. Like we want to make them happy. We want to give them answers. We want to tell them what to do. So like, this is soothing us and our stress response and our ego. It's making the person feel full and the illusion of safety. And here you are going above and beyond. Probably if you're not charging for it or receiving from it, it can easily lead to resentment. Here the client is, and they're going to start going into a shame cycle because they have the information, but they're not doing it.
Right.
And you're both stuck.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a little bit. I'm not sorry. That was my soapbox.
Really, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like, you talk about reprogramming our neural pathways in here, and that obviously is a very rooted way in us. I mean, that's what we naturally default to when we first get into the program. And the idea of relearning that, I mean, it's a dopamine hit, right? And so in a sense of relearning how to get the dopamine hit by presenting them with a way to come up with their own answers for what they're looking for is really what we're after. We're getting curious about them, and in turn we're helping them get curious about themselves in ways that they weren't before, or even in my own experience, even just denying, and so, to be able to continue to lean into these things is really where it's at. And it's our dedication to it.
I think what is showing up for me in this moment is I would love to know, like I've heard you say surrender, and that vulnerability so many times. And also that like we kind of talk this impulse, like literally you probably all know it. And somebody says a word and you're like, oh, I know the answer. And you like stop listening. Can you like walk me through like what is going on inside of you? Because I almost feel like this is an embodiment practice. When you feel the impulse, how do you surrender?
Oh, yeah. I try to regulate myself. I try to self-regulate. That's the control now, is to self-regulate. I mean, okay, so I feel like anytime we come up with answers right away, or we feel that impulse to an answer, we stop listening. And so then that puts us out of active listening. And then so we're just kind of on this waiting to go ahead and give the advice. And so once again, we're kind of disconnecting, right? But I find that the best way for me to stop that is like self-regulating, getting into my breathing. Even if I have to take a breath while they're speaking in the middle of the sentence, that's what I'll do, and try to metaphorically sit next to them on the couch again. And as far as like, continuing to do that, it's a practice for sure. But yeah, definitely what comes up is that feeling of, yeah, like you said, I mean, we feel really good because something that we might do has come up, but the idea to lean in and to just kind of regulate yourself back down to curiosity, that's a layer, getting back into our breathing, getting back into kind of just letting it happen and leaning in, and once again remaining curious. But you wanted me to speak on the vulnerability, and I think part of the vulnerability of curiosity is not trying to put your own experience into it, and to actually be vulnerable to not do that, because I think sometimes we put our own experiences in. Once again, it's because it's comfortable. We're trying to relate to that person's story rather than letting that person's story come into us.
Mm-hmm.
So learning to be vulnerable to yourself, learning to be vulnerable to their moment and their story, so that we can, as best we can through our own experiences, get a clearer picture.
Yeah. I think there's a quote of to truly listen is to allow yourself to be changed, something along those lines.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I can definitely. I mean, especially with what's going on now. I mean, it's really difficult to have regular conversations with folks. I mean, these intentional conversations, coaching conversations, massage therapy, stuff like that. But I mean, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Just on the daily, maybe even trying to have a conversation out in public. I mean, it's really important to remain curious.
Yeah.
A lot of people are
Well,
give information rather than hear information, and so
I just want to call myself out that I totally did the thing where the the thing that I wanted to say popped up, and I should have breathed in and grounded down. Well, and even what was showing up as you said that is I went to the pharmacy last night to pick up some allergy meds for my son, and I noticed, even not even having to have the conversation, but to just say like, well, I wonder what experience that person is having today. And instead of me putting judgment onto people or making assumptions, it brought me back into a state of connection and humanity and just compassion.
Yeah. It's a reminder to take ourselves out of it, right?
And I think you're right. I mean, yeah. So actually, let's go into this, because I'm actually, I keep saying I'm curious because genuinely that is true. Like, how would you define curiosity?
Surrender.
Oh, okay.
I really think, gosh, I'm so glad you asked that. I mean, think about it. When watch your son, your son, when he's curious, is there any ego in that? I mean, and I think that's what curiosity is. It's like, and that route for me to get out of my own way because my ego wants to give advice. My ego wants to tell somebody what to do. Curiosity is about, it's surrendering the ego. It's surrendering you thinking you have the answer, I mean, the answer is there, right? And the idea is that we're trying to align with it. And so to and trust me, this is a daily practice for me. I'm not coming at this as total pro at all. Like I said, this probably came back into my life just recently. But I mean, the idea to surrender my ego enough to not think I have to have the answer and to remain as curious as a child. That I feel is what's helping me learn to see what arises rather than trying to think I have to figure it out for them. Once again, daily practice, everybody. But yeah, you know.
Just even as you said the word surrender, I had this like feeling of presence, of like allowing yourself to be moved, allowing like some work that I've done with Philip Shepherd was allowing the world and the universe to like move through you. It just, I mean, I just feel the embodiment of that. And wow.
It helps me out of it. That's for sure. I mean, especially like I said, I mean, some of the heavier layers going through this during pandemic. I mean, it was so easy to kind of turn the light in on myself when in fact it's like, you know, of course there's some of that needs to be done, but I mean, truly it's not about me. It's about the people I'm serving. And, you know, waking up every day with that mindset, you know, really helps me get out there and continue to grow. I mean, it's so easy. And I think a lot of people we're helping are probably in that sort of like, oh my gosh, how do I get out of here? Right. And so to also go through the experience myself and learning to drop the ego and learning to surrender and lean in and patience, leaning in and the patience have probably been the biggest keys for me to surrender my ego and to be curious as well as being vulnerable. And you know, when I speak about vulnerability, I'm speaking a lot towards intentional vulnerability. I speak to the guys about this a lot. It's really interesting when you bring up vulnerability to a bunch of men, because I've done the work myself, and so I'm kind of comfortable in it. But I've found in my experience that's a really hot topic, and it's a really kind of a sideways topic for a lot of guys. But so when I present it as intentional vulnerability, you know, giving permission to myself to be intentionally vulnerable and to go ahead and lay that down and not have to worry about what somebody's going to think, you know, that's when things can start to work. And, you know, then all those other layers of surrender come in. And it's not easy. I mean, especially when we are turned in on ourselves and trying to get out of our own way. Sometimes we're having to admit a lot of things to ourselves that maybe we weren't seeing. But that intentional vulnerability along with curiosity has definitely allowed a lot of growth. You know, sometimes 2 steps back, 1 forward, but that's not to say that a couple of those don't lead to more 2 steps forward, 1 back.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean,
yeah.
if anything, it's a gorgeous cha-cha. So
Very true.
Well, okay, I love this intentional vulnerability sounds, and you said there's surrender, curiosity, and you also mentioned leaning in. And I think, I guess if somebody's listening to this, they might hear surrender and leaning in and thinking that they're opposites.
Okay.
And I'm curious if you could maybe talk about how those are and how they work together.
Yeah, for sure. In my experience, they kind of circled around each other and fought like cats and dogs. In this journey, I've learned that I have this really hot line of impatience with myself that I hide really well, even from myself.
Are you serious?
Right. So the idea of, and the only way I've been able to get through that, even when it's white hot, and now I know what it is, but before I didn't. I was just feeling this resistance, and leaning in from being in this program, leaning in from my mentors of the men's group I was in before I started my own. It is all about surrendering, because the leaning in pushes me up against my lack of self-patience, And the leaning, honestly, like leaning in has been some of the most challenging portion, getting to surrender, because you're leaning on a wall that you don't necessarily know what it's made of,
Mhm.
until you have enough wherewithal to have the patience to absorb it. And once you finally do that and you're successfully able to lean in and get through the patience, you start to fall through these walls. And then you're into the next leaning in. But it's really been about leaning in, hitting that painful hot wire of my own patience with myself, and learning to lean into that until it just breaks, basically. And that's where, having patience for myself, um, to surrender, to lean on the hot wall when it's necessary.
Yeah.
Um, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. Now it's not any hotter sometimes, maybe, but it's like I tell my kids, sometimes it's only hard until it's not. But that requires showing up every day. That requires surrendering intentionally. That requires leaning in, and a healthy reminder that it doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the question, what if this was easy? Whenever I feel myself in those, like, and I think that description of leaning in, it's like you're intentionally leaning into the edges, and with an energy of curiosity instead of trying to fight or force. It's almost like you're just bringing in an element of non-judgment, curiosity, openness. And it's like the wall then is like the illusion, and you can kind of like move through.
Yeah.
I had this image of only because I just watched Narnia with my son, even though he's probably too young for it. But the first time they go through the closet, it's like you would think that there's a solid piece of wood, and then they just leaned in, and it, you see
Oh
them
yeah.
go through the coats, and then
Hmm.
they get to this like amazing other world. It's like, I think sometimes we, as you said, that like that white hot, like when we hit that resistance, we think it's this wall. But when you lean in, especially leaning in with that part, I love how just so many times you've talked about like sitting next to and with and partnering. Like so much of coaching is partnering, not answering. And so you're just with curiosity, you're just like leaning in and saying, okay, is this true? Does this need to be true? What if this is easy? What's asking to come in? What if I like removing the judgment, and you just watch the wall, like the illusion of the wall just is like, oh,
Yeah.
look what is possible.
Yeah. It's happened
Yeah.
multiple times.
So yeah, and I think where I'd love to kind of go and move into is like, what has practicing, because I do agree that this is a practice. You have talked about a lot of the coaching fundamentals that I personally, having gone through a lot of coaching programs, a lot of people don't talk about the fundamentals and the building blocks of an actual coaching structure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of coaching programs are like, here, follow this PDF.
Yeah.
Instead of, how can you actually be embodied and listen and curious and let the client find and source and see what's possible? So I'd love to know, like, as you have practiced the skill of surrender and curiosity and listening and embodiment and patience, like, what has actually opened up for your clients? Because I think that's what really kicked off our discussion today, was seeing what happens with your clients when you're curious.
I think a lot of what we're talking about, I mean, just the process of even getting through and making friends with intentional vulnerability, or invulnerability in of itself. I mean, like I said, because I've been doing my own work, I think I was a little surprised when some of the guys were having such a hard time with it. But in fact, I think that's what we're working towards. Especially in the men's work. I mean, there's so many expectations of within the men's work and the realm of that. I mean, when we go, I do this thing of like I draw a box and I ask the guys like, what is to be a man? And put all those things in the box, and then things, what is it to not be a man? And put all those things on the outside. Well, when I think of that example, the one thing that is true for most of the men is intentional vulnerability. And, learn it. I think what they are getting from my program, as a matter of fact, several of them have told me, is the ability to be vulnerable with themselves, and to be able to be okay developing their own healthy boundaries, with themselves, with their families, their loved ones. I think there's a lot of people that think we have to say yes to everything, and have all the answers within the realm of, like, when I'm talking to other men, that's what comes through a lot. And so the ability for them to be intentionally vulnerable, maybe not to their outside world, because they still have to go and fulfill those roles, but to be able to create this circle and be able to have another brother or another man to lean into, who also is going through the same thing, and understanding of their own intentional vulnerability. That's what they're coming out with. The idea of being accountable to themselves and their emotions, being able to realize that they can reach out and ask for help. I feel at this point in the men's work, Laura, I'm so blessed. I remind the men that at this point, in the most positive way, we are kings because we have this support. And that makes the rest of your family kings, queens, princes, all of it, because in the sense of being able to have this support. I mean, I'm meeting a lot of men now going into these groups that they don't have it. They don't have the support, and it's really surprising to me. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be, but I'm meeting a lot of men who don't have anybody to lean into, or who think that they do, and then when they do, there's nobody there.
Wow.
And so this work is very important.
Excuse me, my plug came undone.
Oh.
It is very important. And this, as you were talking, this idea of being curious and not having the answers, not knowing everything before you start. I am not a man, nor do I identify as a man. So this, I don't know if I'm making an assumption, but I have heard from many men in my life that there's often a pressure to feel like you have the answers and have it figured out. So for you to go in and demonstrate curiosity and not having the answers and being intentionally vulnerable, I can only imagine how freeing that is to see that there's another option.
Yeah, and that there's other people going through the same thing.
Yeah.
It's really great. My favorite part of running men's groups is the ahas, when I see the men sharing a story that they thought was singular to them. And there'll be 3 or 4 men listening to their story, going like this. A heart tap means I relate, I understand, I'm going through that too, or I've been through that. That's got to be my favorite. I'm getting chills now. I get chills when I see it, and even just talking about it now, I get these warm, just like, oh my gosh, they're getting it. And so to answer that, yeah, I really think in the intentional vulnerability and the accountability, to lean into to other brothers and other people and support. That's a lot of what the men are telling me they're getting, and we're continuing to do that. And it just makes me want to connect more and more, with guys that want this.
I love that.
I even have guys now that, like, in the beginning when I did my first group, I shared my story with you and my reluctance in joining a men's group. Maybe we can talk about that another time. But yeah, there was a little bit of reluctance just because of what socially I thought a men's group was. And so, with the first group, I talked to some guys, and they kind of I had to snicker because they had the same sort of reaction I did when I was asked, like, men's group, what are you doing? Well, now some of these guys are on their own, circling back around and going, I would really like to at least try and see what this is about, because you constantly are reaching out to me and nobody else is, or I'm constantly seeing what you and those guys are up to and doing. And so yeah, it's really interesting to be living this, to have some of my people around me watching me live this through their own tongue in cheek or judgments in the beginning, and really seeing what it's about. And, to share, when I first got involved in the men's group, I had all my preconceived notions, and it's been nothing like I thought it was going to be, because it is what it is, and it's really all about support and being there for each other.
I just love all of this. Can you let folks who are listening know where they can find you and follow you and connect beyond
Yes.
this conversation?
I know some people are probably listening from elsewhere. I'm in Tacoma, Washington, close to Seattle. You can find me on Instagram at Waking Life 253, also on Facebook as well. And I would actually follow me on the Waking Life 253. That's what I'm learning to be more active in. And so, yeah, check that out. And you can also reach out to me there and connect with me as well. And yeah.
I'm so grateful for you, and I love the work that you're doing, and to see you live it. And again, I just starting and deepening. I think that process of, because 5 years from now, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I remember that third men's group that I did, and how much better they are now. The process of just continuing to show up and be curious and be open and see what is possible. I mean, that's the path.
It is.
Anything? Oh, go ahead. Nope.
Oh no, to say connection, curiosity. I mean, yeah, the world's a weird place right now, and so to figure out how to connect is really, really what's super important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets down to the heart of body mind of, we dream of a world where everybody has the tools to connect and to live fulfilled. And yeah, so good. Would you have any, I know we have some folks listening who have kind of been around the body mind coaching, like they're like, oh, do I do this? Anything you might want to say to those folks?
Stick it out. Please just lean in. I mean, if I can do this, honestly, I mean, if anybody wants to know my complicated story, which you probably don't, but honestly, if I can do this with all the layers that I've had on me coming into this program and going through the program, I mean, look, some days you're definitely going to feel better than others, and some days you're going to feel worse than others. But I promise, just show up to the parking lot, so to speak. And what I mean by that is, like I said, sometimes I just have to show up to the parking lot to get to yoga. So if you show up to the parking lot, you'll always be there. Just at least just show up and just lean in. There's your time frame is your own, I promise. I've had many times where I've come to you, Laura, been like, I'm behind, and you're like, behind what? And, yeah, right. I don't know. So just lean in and surrender. We're all on our own time frame, and just as long as we show up every day, it's going to happen.
It is. And I hope as well, for those of you listening, like Duane, you demonstrate so powerfully what it means to start and find your path in this. Like, I am not here to say this is what your path is and this is how you're supposed to do it. It's about really like exploring and feeling in, like you said, that image at the beginning of like, you're there to partner with and sit next to these amazing souls and help them paint their picture. Mm-hmm. Have you seen those images, like the infinity graphic design images, where it's like you see the image and then you like blow up a section and it's deeper, and then it goes deeper and it keeps doing that? I feel like that's what you're doing as a coach, where it's like you're listening and they're painting this picture. Yeah. I'm curious, what's over here?
Good example. Yeah.
And they like blow it up and then they get to paint even more. Yeah. And like, I just think that is, to me, what makes coaching so amazing.
And yeah, for those that are listening, curiosity, I definitely think really helped me get out of my own way. For any of you that are out there having issues with that, I mean, just get curious. Just get curious. Quit looking for the answer. Get curious. It always arises. It does.
It does. Duane, you're amazing. I so appreciate you and your time.
I appreciate you as well, and everything that you're doing. It's amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody, go follow Duane and reach out, of course, if you're interested in body mind.
Yeah.